Namaste, Prasadji. Namaste once again, and
Namaste.
welcoming you again to this Journey Dialogues. We've had two in the row, and this is the third one. And each has been extremely humbling and inspiring. That's my candid submission to you. I recall that in the second episode, you had some very interesting points. I mean, you made a lot of interesting insights, but what I can quickly recall is you went on this whole idea of, where do our desires really come from? Have we reflected on them? And then when they're unreflected, you can trace them back to the environment that we are in. We draw a lot of, because somebody has said so, because somebody is, or it's coming to you as a trigger or a notification, or somebody else is doing it, we draw a lot from there. You had an interesting anecdote about the person carrying a sheep, and and people along the journey kept telling him that, why are you carrying a dog? And the guy somehow starts disbelieving in his own reality. And then, interesting anecdote people can watch in the second episode. You also made a point about self-inquiry being extremely fundamental in some sense. And you also took us through this wonderful description of how you see and sense the whole chakras, the 7 chakras in very different. So it's not a linear progression. It's kind of a sort of a coil or a spiral kind of thing as you go along. Towards the very end, you had an interesting anecdote about Yudhishthira and Duryodhana. And you mentioned that how they both were sent out to a public square or a market. And Yudhishthira was asked to find one bad person, and Duryodhana was asked to find one good person. They came back and none of them could find any. And I want to take that further in this episode with you, Prasadji. So the curiosity is, I'm sure you're not saying that what's out there so you're not saying that there are no problems in the world. You're not saying that. Maybe, and because you're a physicist, maybe what you might say, and I'm just conjecturing, is that if we look at the state of a system, the system can occupy different states. And at a certain state that the system occupies, you can have certain outcomes. And those outcomes may be good for some and not so good for some. But that's the state that the system is occupying. And then if those states are detrimental to somebody's life or survival or thriving, then you should be working towards them. So seeing problem not as problem, but problems as states of system, and then looking at how do we change the states of system so that the problem gets resolved in some manner. Would this be a good reading of what you would be thinking?
I would put it slightly differently. There is when we talk about physics, in quantum physics, there is a particular anomaly called Schrodinger's cat anomaly. So if you put a cat and put some cat food, along with that, you put a small amount of food which is poisonous to the cat, and then seal the cat's container hermetically so that there is no way in which you can actually see or hear or feel what's going on with the cat inside. You cannot even smell if it dies and decomposes. In that situation, can you actually guess whether the cat is alive or dead from outside at any particular time? So the Schrodinger's cat paradox, it comes down to, from outside, as an observer, we can visualize multiple states. Cat can be in any one of that state. It can be dead, it can be alive, it can be sick. And the key is to recognize we have multiple realities and there are multiple possibilities. And we have a choice to pick any one of them. And in different contexts, we may pick multiple things in that. So the idea of recognizing different states exist. They don't exist serially. You pick this state, if it doesn't work, you go to next state. No. It is like what is called multiverse. There are, especially recently, there have been lots of books and movies and contexts about having multiple realities present at any one time. I think that is what is possible for us. So we have, let us say, 10 potential states, which at any one particular time we can choose. And it is possible that different times we try out different states, and that what we call different times might be happening simultaneously. It just depends that we are in one particular time, in one particular state. That's all we have a reality. In that, there is a time as a past, present, and future. And the state as this state versus that might be there. I think that is what in spirituality they call a person being present in multiple places at the same time, or Krishna being with his all his spouses, gopikas, all at the same time. And they vouch for Krishna was with us last night. How does that happen? So there are very interesting paradoxes and anomalies that we can think about. But if we apply it to now, whether it is a drug-induced, when you take mushrooms, or when you take DMT, or when you take about some of these, sometimes the research that is going on, they even call God molecule.
The psychedelics, sorry.
The psychedelic research that is going on right now. They are beginning to say certain kinds of molecules, like psychedelic drugs, can totally alter our brain state. And they can get you the experience of realization or oneness or non-dualistic state. If nothing else, there are enough number of researchers who are beginning to study, saying the depression, the anxiety, or PTSD, post-traumatic stress, situations, disorders, can be permanently removed with 1 or 2 dosings. Of course, there is a lot of research that is being done, but what it means is we have a choice about what state do we choose. What does the choice depend upon? So we can think about who I think I am. That will depend upon it. What I think has happened in the past, it may depend upon. What beliefs I have about potentially happening. Do I consider myself as a scientist? Do I consider myself as a person who is prone to and being interested in psychedelics, being a Vedantin? Or, none of them, I'm a pure rational, logical AI guy, where I look at brain is where my consciousness is emerging. I could actually be all of them to different extent. I may give margin for psychedelics in this context, but in this, no. Or I am a Vedantin, but when you give me this kind of an evidence, it is irrefutable. So I could have all of that. So that means we have potential realities existing, multiple personalities simultaneously existing in each one of us. What reality we choose, what truth we support, depends upon a lot of external factors. But at some level, we have to make that choice. I think it is depending on us and the choice that we make that something becomes fact, something becomes fantasy, some reality becomes present, and other realities look, not so real.
There was something further coming up for me, which I can share. And so last 12 years, I've been blessed with coming up with 2x2 grids. A lot of them, almost 500 of them have happened through me. So one of the grid that has fascinated me is nature-made scarcity and nature-made abundance, man-made scarcity and man-made abundance. Now, there are cases, let's take food, for example, the food grown across the world. And yet a lot of people go malnourished and even without, 1 square meal a day. So I would call this as a man-made scarcity in some sense. The system, I'm just trying to conjecture that the political, economic, social system, the way it is occupying a certain state, it's not allowing the right distribution of food, and people do not have food, or people do not have the right kind of food. To that extent, I believe that there is the point I'm trying to make is within the physical field, physical kshetra, it is bound by the physical laws. But the moment I move towards emotions and psychological states and social truths, I could have variations around them. I could have interpretative states and argumentations around them. A, would you agree with this kind of a framing? And B, when we look at solving these challenges of the world, we will need to agree on certain reality rather than saying that my reality is different than your reality. Which is where the post-truth argument is coming to. Where people are saying that you can have your own truth and I can have my own truth, but somewhere in the Vyavaharik Satya, we'll have to agree on certain truth. So these are some of the curiosities that are emerging for me, Prasad.
So that's a very interesting and very nice way to look at it. And that's what we call, in science, we say, if we agree on initial conditions, and if we agree on a certain hypothesis, under this set of initial conditions, this hypothesis can be tested out because we have simplified the situation. We have removed everything other than one particular variable. Everything else is a constant. In that context, we can test it out and see whether the hypothesis is truth or false. But outside of that duality that we created, outside of that grid that we can look at, the reality is a lot more complex. So now, how we frame that opens up very, very interesting possibilities. Like I remember there is a group of people in Washington who tried to look at, especially 10, 20 years ago, the abortion protests. The protesters, especially when in the United States we had the Roe v. Wade scenario open, and there were lots of abortion clinics all around in different states. there were people who were bombing abortion clinics, who were actually trying to kill abortion doctors, and protest and all kinds of things were going on. So one group of people looked at it and said, I want to bring some of these people who are, in the name of killing the baby, they're killing various people who are doing what they are doing because they think that is necessary for the women's health or well-being, or under what circumstances that pregnancy had occurred, and under what circumstances the baby can come out. Based on that, they are making something. On the other hand, the different realities that they live in, when they are brought into a group and looked at from their educational background, their family background, their empathy, their love towards each other, how they treat their children, how they go to their places of worship, society, if somebody is in need of help, how do they help? When people from both sides are brought in, and you don't tell them this person is for, one or against, and put them in a context, they may even like each other and they may really, become good friends. But the moment you create an issue as this versus this, and in this context, what would you look at? Suddenly, all the love and the camaraderie and the connection they have could go out the door, depending upon how strongly they have that belief and how that belief begins to take over. That polarizes, that belief begins to polarize, and everything that I know about this person, 90% of what that person says, I believe. I won't say 90% I love this person. In this, we agree to disagree and we move on. It doesn't work that way. So what it means is the lens through which you look at it, the belief through which you make a decision, the fact through which you really want to judge or establish, the grid that is established itself could become the source of conflict, or could become the source of clarification and truth and reconciliation, and all of that can happen. So I think it is extremely important to formulate the grid in a way that what are the conditions under which this grid is true and false. I think those are the kind of social science frameworks and experiments that could be really looked at. And the last point I want to make in this is, like recently, there have been lots of violent incidents around the world. Some people who go and kill other people. But if you try to look at their past, some of them leave a lot of cues. Some of them have got a lot of, how they put on their social media, how they have been suffering in the hands of bullies, or how their family circumstances made them a loner and hate their colleagues or their co-students or whatever. But on the other hand, there are some people who are an enigma because they seem to be so genial, so wonderful, and so kind, and help out all of them. How could this person go do what they did? When we try to look at that from a psychological perspective, sociological perspective, cultural perspective, what we are understanding is that they have a break in their what you might call a uh, consciousness, if you want to call, or you can call there have been a break in their rationality, logic. You can think about different ways to frame it. So there are many circumstances in which a person's sanity might just be disrupted. That's why insanity defense is very popular in these kinds of situations in court cases.
Yes, yes. So wonderfully laid out. This is what's emerging as a curiosity further, Prasadji, is given that the state in which I am plays an important role in how I perceive what's happening right now, what I make of it, what I contribute, how do I listen, how do I engage, uh, how do selection pressures work in the moment. Given all of this, what role that you have been a champion and a founder and an architect of so many programs in the world, what would you have done differently, given that now you are in the studentship, a new kind of studentship as you described in the last episode? What do you think needs to be added in those programs, in the coachings and the courses for leadership, that can help them in some sense, that can aid them, given this filters that we use that can become narrow sometimes?
I think we need to develop more self-awareness and self-acceptance. The key, it looks like, for me to be able to look at the reality outside of me, to be friendly, to be kind, and to develop a relationship with the people around me, I need to be able to recognize, I am not, just because I'm very good in one, I'm good in everything. Just because I have a PhD in physics doesn't mean I know all aspects of physics or I can teach any part of physics. Actually, like somebody said, PhD means piled higher and deeper. Like you are really piling up both body of knowledge, and at the same time, you are so deep under the certain set of belief systems, you know a lot about a very small, insignificant thing that nobody may even care about. Right?
Sorry, there is just wonderful, I'm reminded of Swami Subodhananda of Prasanna Trust. He once mentioned PhD as permanent head damage.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. So what it means is expertise in a narrow domain. And that's wonderful that you have such a clarity and such a, what you might call, ability to make original contributions in that domain. But that can also give you blindness in many other areas. Same thing, not just about a PhD in a subject, but also you can talk about a medical doctor. So as a matter of fact, a medical doctor has to go through broad, all areas, general physician stage they need to go through before they do and get an advanced degree in heart or advanced degree in lungs or eyes or, pathology or any of that stuff. And then sometimes they get a fellowship, even more advanced. If I am into, let us say, pediatrics, then I may do pulmonary pediatrics, or I may really look at oncology, pediatric I may do. When I become such a specialist, pediatric oncology, doesn't mean I don't know how to give for a child's fever or child's earache that I need to suggest Augmentin, or I need to give children's Tylenol, or I need to, look at this. And if a kid is, throwing up. But what happens is, I'm only a specialist in this area, but every other area, I am nincompoop, or I'm not qualified to treat. What do you mean you are not qualified to treat? You actually got qualification to treat the general diseases before you got into specific, and then specific group of people, specific set of circumstances. So we go from general to specific. But we like to stay on that edge of specific, but completely forget the general, broader body of knowledge. That's what we call specialization. I think we need to teach people to develop what sometimes in the management language they call T-type personality needs to be developed. So you are broad at this level, like at 30,000 feet, when you are on an airplane, you can look at big picture. But you have the ability to come down the I bar at any time, to go down to, underground, like a 3 feet below or 6 feet below, to be able to do certain things. But we somehow become I bar specialists, but we forget the big picture. Or we become the generalist and we lose the capability to dig down and make a contribution. Both of them depend upon the perspective that we have about ourselves and the perception that we have about our body of knowledge and the awareness that we have about the competencies and special capabilities and strengths that we have, and also the weaknesses that we have in many other areas are ignored. So in that respect, if you were to look at somehow, who am I being? Like again, it is from Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter. A good friend and a colleague of mine, one Raghu Anantanarayan, keeps saying, when you are doing what you are doing, what are you really doing? So if I can really look at it and say, when I'm talking to you, when we are conducting this dialogue, what are we really doing? What are we really focusing on? What are we trying to make happen? And what is it that I am trying to communicate? Or, why am I doing this? If I truly begin to ask, I may discover that my own selfish reasons to do what I am doing. And when I become aware that everything I do, I'm not just trying to be nice to you, I'm not just enjoying this interview and conversations with you, I also have my own point of view, my own need, my own obsession, my own compulsion, my own interior motive. And when I learn to accept that, and when I learn to embrace that, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, if I can actually accept that I can be wonderful in this conversation with you, but in something else I might fight like a dog with you. And both of them are existing within me, like the Native American story. They talk about, the two wolves that we have. Which one will win? The one that I feed will win. So first, I need to know there are two wolves in myself. Number two, they can be really good and bad. You can say the God and the devil both exist within me. I have the capability to embrace either one and create mass killings, or I can devote and dedicate myself for the peace in the world, and I can do both of them. And at different times, I may do something towards each of them. And I'm capable of it. I have done it. And I am that whole with all the polarities. And am I able to love myself? Or am I going through what I call a GPS system, guilt, pride, and shame? In that process, I stop living the current moment because of all what I have done in the past. Or I may continue to do when I'm angry, or when I'm upset, or when I'm, worried, or when I'm concerned, or when I'm afraid. So, certain amount of self-awareness of multiple personalities that I encompass, and at the same time, the ability for me to recognize that at any one point of view, any one point of time, one of that personalities is the one that is going to dominate. And the dominant personality doesn't necessarily mean everything else is gone. It just is given right now the opportunity and time to make its point of view. When I accept myself, who I am is the devil himself, and the God, and also the Brahman. So then once I have that potential recognized fully in me, then my ability to actualize that potential depends upon the choices I make and the optimism that I have. And if I become cynical, I will take one set of choices. I'll make one set of choices. And if I really am hopeful, positivistic, and I somehow focus on the joy, then I may make completely different set of choices. So I think if we can teach people that we are everything and we are nothing, but when we respect other people, because just like me, everybody else is around making the similar choices, and they have all the possibilities that are available to me are available to them also. It is just that what choices they are choosing, not the decisions they are making. Because decisions sometimes we do because we are helpless. But the choices that we do are coming out of our own volition. So when we make certain kinds of choices, fully aware that everybody else is making those choices, and I'm compassionate towards them, I am accepting their choices, I'm happy that they have the ability to make those choices, and I can see that they are no different than me, then possibly there can be peace and there can be love in a more positive way, and there may be more love and more opportunity for us to resolve our issues without violence. But the moment I succumb to fear, it's all gone. That's why in the God statues, or in the characteristics, when we talk about Satanamas and Sahasranamas of God, Abhayam comes one of the first one. Abhayam, not having fear. So the idea is you are protected, you do not have anything to fear, becomes extraordinarily important. Same thing, like even in Upanishad, like Taittiriya Upanishad, Bito deti suryaha, Bitad indrasyagnischa. So he says, essentially, the world operates by bhiti, the fear. Even Indra, Varuna, Agni, they operate because of the fears. And right immediately, he says, but if you can really begin to operate from Ananda, the joy, then there is nothing like it. And immediately, actually, after making these statements, the Upanishad, the writer, goes to talk about all the way from the happiness of a person who is healthy, who is in prime of youth, and who has everything they need. He says their happiness is one unit. And then he talks about levels of beings going all the way from, like he talks about Manushya Gandharva, Pitrudeva, Prajapati, Deva, Bruhaspati, Indra, and then Brahmanandam. So Brahmanandam, he says 10 to the power 20 when compared to the happiness. So he says that much happiness is possible and available. And, I'm trying to analyze who are these in-between levels of gods and what do they own? Why do they have that much of happiness? One of these days I'll write up about it. And I'm trying to research and I'm finding at some level, and each level, when you come to Brahman, you let go of your identity. You are the creator because that's what you are. You know fully well. So if you were to still look at Brahman as the all-pervasive consciousness, Brahma as the manifested God with a name and foreheads and a responsibility to create the world, along with Vishnu, the sustainer, and the Shiva, the destroyer. So he knows, I'm creating this world while my father is going to maintain it, while my colleague is going to destroy it. And that's a cycle. And I'm perfectly all right with it. And by the way, right now I'm Chaturmukha Brahma. In this particular time and place, I came in and this is my creation process. And when next Pralayam happens, I will disappear. This Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva, their time is done, gone. Then maybe there is a Ashtamukha Brahma, there is a Shodasha Brahma, and there may be a Brahma with 64 faces. So when I recognize that I'm playing a role, even if I'm playing that role, then the happiness becomes multiplied because I'm just in this particular time, in this particular place, I'm doing this role. This may be the highest, I'm creating the entire universe, highest job. And that joy, he considers as a joy of a completely different nature. So that ability for us to recognize I'm nothing and I am everything. None of them I can experience all of it at one time. But I have the potential to experience it. Can I be humble? Can I be responsible? Can I be creative? And can I be, conscious that there are so many other people and at any one time they are realizing their potential or they're destroying their potential and that of other people. So I'm just playing a certain role. It is like a movie. At the end of the 2-hour movie, whether Shah Rukh Khan was a judge or whether Shah Rukh Khan was a villain or whether the Shah Rukh Khan was a warrior or he was a Jawan fighting for India, it doesn't matter. He is laughing all the way to the bank with hundreds of crores. He doesn't think he is judge or he is a Jawan or he is a, what you call, any of the roles he played, it doesn't matter. He knows who he is. So he can act with joyful abandon without worrying about, oh my God, if I play this bad villain role, what will happen to me? No, he doesn't. He has a very clear sense of it. So in the movie, on the screen, you can be anybody whom you want. What if the world is nothing but such screen? And we are just acting out in this drama, and who we are is not the role that we are playing. Then we can experience more joy. I think that knowledge, if people can get, if they can say, I'm okay, I might be Ambani's son, or I might be a beggar's son, doesn't make any difference because this is the role I'm playing. Let me play with joyful abandonment and enjoy whatever I'm doing and do it to the fullest capability that I have. I think if people can act from that role, that perspective, and recognize the role is temporary and that we have this, then I have a feeling the kind of leadership that we demonstrate, kind of compassion that we bring, and the kind of richness that the world will experience is going to be something worth really attention to.
This is so so beautiful, Prasadji, and I wonder, will I ever have the end of the episode requesting, not requesting for another time, maybe some other day, because there are so many curiosities that keep coming up. But what I would do as a start is, we've recorded 3 episodes. We'll put them out first. And the curiosities that I have, I'll put them out in a Google document and share with you. And some other day, we'll try and catch up and address them as well. This has been fascinating exchange with you.
See, this is not like a beginning and a end. When we can operate with no agenda to have deep and meaningful conversations, then I become a mirror, you become a mirror. And whatever image that I project onto your mirror will get reflected onto my mirror. And if we are two mirrors, then it can have infinite reflections.
Yes.
But if one person is being a mirror, of course, another metaphor that different people have used is, if your mind is a mill pond, then every stone that I throw as a question will create its own ripples. We can watch the ripples, and at the end of reaching the boundaries, the ripples die off, and the mill pond will again gain its mirror-like transparency, where we can even see the rock that has created the ripples at the bottom of the mill pond.
Yes.
So the idea is that, if there is a way in which you can come with some genuine things, and if I can come up with genuine ways of reflecting, and we can have this conversation. This is not like a beginning and an end. What are we reflecting on?
Yes.
So it is fun. And I enjoyed my 3 conversations with you. Thank you for wonderful questions and willingness to listen. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.